All right, let's enter.
who I call a reactionary socialist. I don't know what he calls himself. I guess we're going to find out. Look, he's here now. Uh, so, welcome to my guest here, Hayes. We're going to have a debate tonight about a variety of different topics. Uh, I see this lasting 1 hour. We haven't communicated too much about the dimensions of this beforehand. That's never great. But here we are. And since we don't know each other very well, I'd like to start by just asking you a couple of questions about your politics, because I find it hard to parse just from the look that I've taken at some of your stuff. Do you mind if I ask you, do you support China? Do you see China as an imperialist power?
No,
No what?
it's not an imperialist power.
Okay, fair enough. Do you see it as a socialist country?
Yes.
All right, that's a good start. We're in agreement on that point then. What about the USSR? Is that a country and history and legacy that you do you uphold? Do you find yourself closer to the position of like Stalin killed 100 million people or Stalin did
I'm a
nothing wrong, for
Stalinist,
example?
100% Stalinist.
All right. Well, I see some overlap there as well. Um, over the last summer, I sort of became known as this, right, Dr. Stalin. And what about when it comes to more social issues? I notice on your Substack you have a kind of rejection of woke culture, but I'm having a hard time understanding what that means. Um, do you support, for example, say a woman's right to choose?
For abortion,
Yeah.
I think this is a poorly constructed question. Women's right to choose unconditionally does not exist anywhere in the world. Maybe Sweden is an exception. Even in liberal Europe, there's not an unconditional right to choose at any stage of the pregnancy. Broadly speaking, I'm not against abortion, but I reject this dichotomy between completely unrestricted abortion, even 8 months in, and completely banning it entirely.
Okay. So you'd favor some restrictions, is that right?
I personally, I think that's mainly women's business to sort amongst themselves. The women who are against abortion really are not being given fair representation because they are a big contingent of women who are against abortion. I personally, I would not know when to restrict it, but I just realize that it's normal for most countries to have some restrictions on when you can get an abortion.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me a little bit problematic when you start saying, well, you explain yourself, right? Like we don't typically have that, like if we take the position that abortion is healthcare, for example, you don't typically say like, why do you want a healthcare procedure, right? Like but if you're putting restrictions on it, then all of a sudden you do have to explain, right? Because they're like, okay,
Sure.
why do you
Can you
want?
name me communist states that have no restrictions?
Well, I mean, we're not talking about other states. We're talking about what
Yeah,
our
I'm a
state should be
communist
doing,
though, so
right?
I
Yeah.
don't agree that communist states are oppressing women by restricting abortion to some extent.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Um, what about what about something like gay rights? I mean, like when you go out of your way to reject woke culture, and people might think, well, maybe you just sort of hate gays. I mean, is that the case, or how would you describe your politics when it comes to LGBTQ rights and so forth?
I don't hate LGBT people, but I recognize the interest group. I'm against the interest group called the LGBT movement. Yeah, it's completely anti-communist. Has historically always served an anti-communist role. Serves the establishment. Is in bed with the NGOs, the Democratic Party, and the agenda of the ruling class. They're the ones who are establishing it as an interest group. I do think people should have rights to privacy and be left alone because of their sexuality and so on and so on. However, I don't agree that there should be a alignment between a communist movement and a so-called LGBT movement.
Given the amount of exclusion of groups like, for example, gays and lesbians in so many different social movements, right?
For
Political
example,
movements. Well, I mean, you any pretty much anything you could name, right, is exclusionary towards gays, except for like the gay rights movement
I
itself, you know.
disagree.
But like,
There's gay
well,
people in
you
the
know that gay
Republican
people
Party.
have long been excluded from certain occupations, for example, right?
Which ones?
Really, you're unaware of that?
Today, which ones are gay people excluded from?
The question is, given the legacy of exclusion, if you're not inclusive, are you being exclusionary, right?
I'm
And
asking you
then is the
which
perception.
occupations are exclusive only to straight people in America today.
Well, you're gonna have to do your own homework on that. But
So
that
there
is
are
a
none.
very clear case, right?
There
I
are
mean,
none.
like, really? Okay, all right.
No,
Um,
that's what you're implying. You can't name any, so I guess there are
do
none.
you think there were 50 years ago?
Probably.
Uh, what might be something you should look into? But given that there is clearly is a legacy of exclusion, right?
How does
The
that
question
manifest
is,
itself?
the question is, does that are gays and lesbian, might they see the
Didn't
communist
you say
movement as
you're known as
exclusionary
Dr.
towards them and
Stalin?
their interests? Right? Are we cutting off a contingency here? When really, I think we should be trying to like embrace all parts of the working class, right?
The
If you cut
Republican
off certain,
Party is Christian and conservative, and they have gay people in the Republican Party.
they have a few, right?
And also, didn't you say you're Dr.
Is that
Stalin?
party widely favored? I mean, does that matter?
Hold
You
on,
know,
didn't you say you're
is the
Dr.
Republican
Stalin?
Party widely favored by LGBTQ folks?
Sorry?
Um, is the party widely favored by LGBTQ
It's starting
folks?
to.
I don't
Among
think
gay
so.
men, it's starting to.
Maybe among the most privileged segment.
And it's only a matter, I
The,
mean, there's Blair White now, so it's only a matter of time. There's even transgender conservatives now. So anyway, my question to you is: you say your name was Dr. Stalin, something like this. You claim I'm a reactionary socialist when my views on this matter are more liberal than Stalin's. Stalin views homosexuality as a bourgeois degeneracy and decadence, and when a Western LGBT gay man from Britain wrote to Stalin on the persecution of homosexuals within the USSR, Stalin privately scoffed at the man and called him a degenerate. Is Stalin a fascist
yeah, but
reactionary socialist?
you're comparing the 1920s and 30s to today.
What does the
Things have
passage of
moved.
time have to do with it? Time has passed, so Stalin viewed it as a fundamental perversion of bourgeois society.
I don't think that's true. But even so, what does it
But
matter,
they wrote
right?
as much. It was
The
explicitly
question,
written by the Stalinist intellectuals and communist leaders of the USSR throughout the
what
entirety of the
Stalin
USSR's existence, almost except maybe toward the tail end under Gorbachev. But this was always the view of communists in the USSR, which you have claimed as a
what
litmus
Stalin
test.
and Mao and all the great revolutionaries share is that these are highly pragmatic, practical people, right? And they all share the same goal, which is global proletarian revolution, right? And I
Okay?
think that that's a goal we share as well, right? I mean, that would be a point of commonality between us. Am I right?
It depends on what you mean, but sure.
Oh, well, that's good, right? It depends on what I mean by global
Trotsky said
proletarian
the same thing.
revolution. To me, let's see. This is a good question to explore, right? To me, it means, well, first you would have a global dictatorship of the proletariat, right? I mean,
No,
you have to get
what do
rid
you mean
of
a
the
global? This is
blood-sucking
Trotsky.
class that
This is
currently runs the
Trotskyism.
world.
There's no
You say
framework.
no to this?
There is no framework within Marxism Leninism for a global proletarian dictatorship. So thus far, all the examples of proletarian dictatorship have been confined to one country, and even in the interrelations between different proletarian dictatorships, such as the USSR and China, could not come to a common global framework for a proletarian dictatorship. So this sounds Trotskyist to me that you're saying global pro. How would you have a global one?
We'll see. This is a good question, right? But you're talking about nations jockeying over things like borders and policies and whatever, because we're coming out of a long history of the modern nation state where nations are these boundary, they exist in, a
China and the USSR were not nation states. They still could not come to a common framework for a proletarian global dictatorship.
what we're talking about is these nations are jockeying with one
They're
another
not
and having to
singular
protect
nations. China
their
has
boundaries
several
and their policy.
nationalities. The USSR had several nationalities within it. They were civilization states, not nation states.
I don't know how that's salient as a distinction, but the point is
It's salient
everyone is
because you
trying to
cannot
get.
establish an artificial unity of peoples on the basis of ideology. There are historical roots to the extent to which civilizations are united, which cannot be leapfrogged or bypassed through some kind of political framework. Now, eventually, supposedly, the idea is that borders will eventually disappear in communism and that there will be no different states as such, because the state as such will wither away. But that's not the proletarian dictatorship. The proletarian dictatorship confines itself to the existence in which the state is preserved. So how can you talk about a global state? It makes no sense.
I don't think global state would necessarily be the
A
first
proletarian
step.
dictatorship
This is
only
what we're
exists
talking about.
insofar as the state is
What does
weaponized by the proletarian
what does
class.
global
Of course, it's a
socialism
state.
actually look like? How does that move forward, right? Imagine that happening in not just one country or maybe a small handful of countries, but happening globally. I mean, this is a very traditional point of thought in Marxism, right? How might global socialism take root? Can it
Okay,
happen in one country,
but the
or
problem,
are we talking about a global movement?
sure, the problem.
Am I
Excuse me.
right? That's
Well, excuse me, Dr. Trotsky. The problem is that what you're talking about is a global proletarian dictatorship. The proletarian dictatorship necessarily implies a state. And the whole meaning and purport of socialism in one country is that states have civilizational and national roots. They're not based on ideologies, they're based on the specific relationship between a historically constituted people and an organ of class dictatorship. So no, you cannot have a global proletarian dictatorship. And when you talk about this global revolution happening simultaneously, it's been disproven by history that is not the path in which the victory of global communism will be established. China, Soviet Union, all of the successful communist
Glad you have
revolutions
so
did
much
not
faith
happen
in this that
simultaneously.
you would say it's disproved.
Of course, it's
That's a little
disproved.
bit to me. That's a little bit like saying communism has been disproved because it hasn't happened yet.
There is
we don't
no
we don't actually know. You know
the,
the
the,
jury's
the
still out
law
on
of
that.
social revolution necessarily dictates that it would be extremely improbable for a communist revolution to happen simultaneously across the entire globe. The basic
Let's
law of
focus on the
social
United
revolution.
States then. Let's say we're focused on how do we achieve that proletarian revolution in the United States, and what does it
Okay.
look like? Right.
You establish a premier party of the American working class first.
Okay. What's that look like?
It doesn't
Do
look
you
like
not
the
need
American
unity?
left that we have now, which confines itself to an acute minority of social parasites.
Social parasites. See, when you use language like that, it
Sure.
really makes me think of things like Judeo-Bolshevism or,
Okay,
you
can I
know,
tell you what the
degenerate
Jew?
Marxists
What did the
or
Jew Marx, who was a Jew? Or do you deny that Marx was a Jew?
well, what I'm saying is when you use language like that, it
Okay,
really gives me
okay. So
the Nazi
here's
feel.
what Marx said. Marx, apparently, who's the next Adolf Hitler, he said the great mass of so-called higher grade workers, such as state officials, military people, artists, doctors, priests, judges, lawyers, and you bracket those down into categories that only exist in today, like computer engineers and all that other kind of shit, hipsters or whatever. Same shit, right? Some of whom are not only not productive, but in essence destructive, but who know how to appropriate to themselves a very great part of the material wealth, partly through the sale of their immaterial commodities. That's the basic structure of parasitism. Marx is describing these people as parasites. He literally calls them people partaking in the consumption, parasites on the actual producers. That's what Marx calls them. And that is the class basis of the current left. That is the only meaningful mass that the American left today has actually managed to gain a foothold in and reach out to. So for you saying this reminds you of Nazi rhetoric, are you accusing Marx of Nazism? Because he more or less said the same thing.
It is Nazi rhetoric, sure, yeah.
Okay, and Marx
But,
was a
when
Nazi.
Marx talks about parasites, he's talking about a very particular class, and that
No,
is
he's
the
not. He
bourgeoisie.
gave a plethora of classes defined by the sale of immaterial commodities.
Well, no, these are people who
Sorry,
live off
excuse me,
of
Dr.
the
Trotsky.
social
These are his
surplus.
words ad verbatim. ad verbatim. I'm quoting it to you
Well,
literally as he
yeah.
wrote it and as he said it.
Did you know that you can quote someone and still get them wrong?
Okay, explain the context.
You know that that's possible.
I will allow you
So
the floor to explain the context.
when Marx is very focused on surplus labor, right? And he considers a worker to be productive if their work directly produces surplus value, right?
Okay.
Now, some workers' work does not directly produce surplus value. Let's take a manager, for example, right? Marx says managers are semi productive and semi unproductive, right? A lot of managers are just unproductive. All they do is make sure you don't take too long of a bathroom break, right? That's not adding anything to the surplus value, and hence that worker is unproductive, right?
So why did Marx call
But
them
there's lots of
parasites?
unproductive workers, right? Let's say somebody works in advertising, right? They're not directly producing a product, but they're indirectly assisting with the realization of commodities, right? So, you know, to say that they're parasites in the same sense that you would say, oh, that the Nazis would say, oh well, the Judeo-Bolshevik, that's a
Who
parasite.
has said
That is not
Judeo-Bolshevik?
the sense in which Marx
Who
is
has
using
said
that.
Judeo-Bolshevik? I said an
It's
acute
the same
minority
kind
of
of language.
parasites on the people.
Well, it's the same kind of language, man. Like when you
I use the
and
same language
particularly if
Marx
you
used.
post,
That's
we
Marx's
started off
language.
having a point of contention because you have a post that says these people are not the same species, right?
Well, before we
I'm
get to
sorry,
that,
but that is
do you also
exactly
need
the
what
kind of
Lenin
thing the
said
Nazis
about
say.
how the intellectuals of Russia at the time thought that they were the golden class of the nation, but actually they were the shit of the nation? That's what Lenin said about the intelligentsia. Call them the shit of the
Are you
nation.
saying this in order to defend yourself? Because I don't see the connection.
I am saying you are accusing me of using Nazi language because I called people parasites. Marx said the same thing.
Well,
Lenin
you said that
basically
they were
says,
part of a different species because of their dyed hair and
okay, you want
things.
to talk about the Chaz degenerates.
The what?
The Chaz degenerates.
What does that refer to? I don't understand that.
The people that I am throwing it out there, questioning whether they are of our species anymore.
Okay, Chaz. Is
That's the
that
Chaz
referred to the?
mugshot. Those are the people who were at Chaz who lynched two black teenagers
Okay.
and were bragging about it on Twitter.
Yeah.
That
So
was
how
them.
does it help to question people's humanity? Let's say that they're activists. They're trying to do something that it might be even broadly
Lynch black
supportive, right?
teenagers activism, right?
Well, I didn't notice you making that sort of critique. Your critiques seem to be based purely on their appearance.
Do those people look human to you?
Yes,
I
they
don't think
do.
so. I think they've lost every
Just because they
semblance
have
of
colored
humanity.
hair,
I
they look
disagree.
very
I
human to
think
me.
they've lost every semblance of humanity.
Well, okay, let's say that you think that, right? But you see how that would be bad optics to go on a public place like Twitter and then say that, right? I mean,
I
have you
want to
noticed that many
initiate
of your
this sorry,
have you noticed that many
discourse.
of your communist colleagues are openly calling you a Nazi?
They're
Most
not
communists do
communists.
not have that problem. Most
No, they're
communists
not
do not get
communists.
called Nazis.
Those are
They never
American
have that problem.
liberals. They're not communists.
Well, like, I wonder why people don't have that problem. Maybe it's because they don't toe the line on things that look extremely racist, extremely misogynist, extremely transphobic. Why do that? I mean, where's the upside? How does it help organize workers towards a US proletarian revolution, let's say?
Mao said the first step, draw a line. That's what I'm doing. Drawing a line.
Yeah,
So
but
that
you're
we can
drawing a line that
distinguish
seems to
so that
exclude a
as
lot of
communists we can
vulnerable people.
distinguish ourselves from these lowly scum, social scum, whose humanity is now questionable. As Marx called them, the social scum of our society, the dregs, this
Well, I
people,
think
and
you're referring to the
Engels, who
lumpy
praised the
proletariat here.
workers of France for putting up signs that we're going to shoot the thieves because they didn't want anything to do with this social scum, degenerate class of people who are the enemy of the proletariat, enemy of the working class, according to all historical communist figures.
No, I mean, that sounds like Nazi stuff right there. Nazis are the one who banned stuff like this, right?
Frederick
You
Engels
know,
was a Nazi.
I think Hayes might be the Nazi because you're not
Who?
doing a good job defending yourself, right? Remember, we're trying to do something tactically, right? The
I'm a
question
communist with a
is
capital
are these
C. You called
tactics
me a Nazi for
effective?
repeating what my communist authors have said. The people I draw inspiration from, that whose writings I'm trying to remain faithful to. You accuse me of being a
Yes, with
Nazi for saying the
slavishly
same thing
repeat
they
things
said.
from the past, you might end up saying the exact opposite of what they meant,
Why?
you know?
Why? Because it became
Well,
trendy because the corporate media made it trendy to say the
because
opposite.
because
That way?
Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, these people are not trying to persecute vulnerable minorities. They're trying to create a society that works for everyone, right? Now, to do that,
To
you
be
have to
honest, I
get rid of
think
a small
Marx and
class of blood
Engels
suckers.
wanted to do more than just persecute the social scum that they mentioned. Because yeah, I really doubt that. I think they saw the revolution as an extremely violent process. And if you saw the things that they said early on, I mean, it was I'm even against some of that stuff, right? But let's not get off on this idea that Marx and Engels were peace, love, hippies who said, "Oh, we love everyone." They weren't. They were fighters first and foremost for the proletarian class, and beyond the proletarian class, the broad strata of the people as a whole, meaning the democratic petty bourgeoisie of the countryside, as Lenin described it in the Civil War in France. As Marx described it in the Civil War in France, and as Lenin elaborated it with his notion of the unity of the workers and the peasants. Nowhere within this formula do we have the parasite professional managerials or the lumpen social scum.
Professional managerial class is not really a Marxist construction now, is it, right? Because
So,
that
what do
doesn't
you
really
call
have much
the higher
to do.
grade workers who are, in essence, destructive and who are parasites on the actual producers and who sell immaterial commodities? Because that's how I define it. That's Marx's language. All I've
You
done is give
you
a
simply
name.
call that unproductive labor. That's what Marx calls it.
No, but
It's
that's not what
unproductive
Marx
labor.
calls it here.
It is what Marx calls it.
Marx called them
He says there's productive labor and
Marx called
there's
them
unproductive labor.
so-called higher grade workers, clearly referring to a separate strata. If you want to know how communists have historically referred to this group, like Lenin and so on, they called them the upper layers of the petty bourgeoisie or the middle class. They usually called them urban petty bourgeoisie, and that's what we're dealing with. For example, Marx talked about, in regards to the social democratic movement at the time, that the democratic petty bourgeoisie, that's what he called them, and everywhere pressed and preached to the proletariat general unity and reconciliation, extend the hand of friendship, and seek to find a great opposition party. They seek to ensnare the workers in a party organization in which the general social democratic phases prevail, while their particular interests are kept hidden behind, and in which, for the sake of preserving the peace, the specific demands of the proletariat may not be presented. Sounds like today's DSA. Sounds like every single so called communist left wing organization we have in the United States today.
There are a lot of weak communist parties out there.
They
There
are
are a
all
lot of
weak.
weak left parties,
Which ones
and we
aren't
need
weak?
strength. We need strength, right? How does the working class get to strength, right? Well, you got to take the right ideological line, and the right ideological line is one that leads to unity, not fracturing, right? So, when I see somebody who has a Substack, but like all three of the articles on there are basically focused on attacking other communists, and I question, like, how does that lead to unity, right? And especially when I don't see such a strong ideology that I say, oh, yes, this is going to unite everyone, right? In fact, what I see is a pretty weak ideology to the extent that I can parse it. I see something that's pretty divisive. I think if you're peeling off big sections of the working class, if you're saying, look, we're not friends of gays, right? We're not friends of trans people.
Okay.
We're not friends of women, particularly, right? We reject wokeism.
What do
We're
you
in
mean,
favor
friends with
of what
women?
traditional family
Ontologically, what you're
structure.
saying is nonsense. 50% of humankind is women. What do you mean against women? As if a community of men is the default? No, 50% of all human beings are women. So the fact that you're trying to establish women as some
I'm reaching a
special.
little
No,
bit
no, no.
because I
The
don't
fact that
actually
you're
see a
trying to
statement from
establish.
you.
The fact that you're
See
trying
as a
to establish
forceful
women as
rejection
some
of
kind of
wokeism.
separate interest
What
group
does
that's
it
just
mean
like
to
separate.
forcefully reject wokeism? What
50
does that mean?
most women are not woke. They don't buy into wokeism. Stop speaking for most women. But I'll respond to your
Well, they,
claim.
they don't want to be
Sure.
trapped in a
I'll,
patriarchal traditional family structure. I mean, usually,
no,
there's dog
I
whistles
think
that
many
go on,
women
right?
long. I think
Like
many
when
women
somebody says,
long.
I believe in conservative values, what is that a dog whistle for, right? They believe in a traditional family structure that enslaves women in the
I'm
household.
sure
That is what
most
they believe
women
in.
would rather be in a polycule with you. But anyway, I'll respond to what you said based on Lenin's quote. He said, "Unity is a great thing and a great slogan, but what the workers' cause needs is the unity of Marxists, not unity between Marxists and the opponents and distorters of Marxism. I consider the American left, the people that I've targeted in my Substack, the opponents and distorters of Marxism.
Okay. But in order to say somebody's distorting it, you need to have a pretty good articulation of it yourself, right? I mean, you need
Demonstrate
to
the
attract people around a
inarticulate
positive
demonstration of my
ideology.
Marxist, my knowledge of Marxism. Demonstrate it now. That's what we're here for.
Well, I look at what's in print. I'm a bit of a reader.
Good. Go ahead.
That's my background. I'm not going to watch a bunch of debate streams. I'm not going to
Wonderful.
watch a bunch of
You read my
streams.
Substack. Tell us why I'm
I
not
did read your
articulate.
Substack, yeah. And it was pretty hard to make sense of, but I surely did not see in there, here's what is imperialism. I did not see in there, here's what socialism is. I did not see in here,
Lenin
here's the
already did
countries which
that.
I think are on the road to
Lenin
socialism.
wrote imperialism the highest stage. Why should I reprint what Lenin said when he already wrote it? I was
Well, you
writing
could
about
at least say you
specific
agree with
things.
it. Instead, you say something else. You say that Trump is a more effective anti-imperialist than all of these Beizao, what's that term? Western white
Aizawa,
leftists?
absolutely true. I stand by that. Trump was far, far more of an anti-imperialist than all the Beiswolf frauds combined in the history of the American left since the counterculture. So all of
Does
these
that
scum
mean
combined,
is that more
Trump
of a
was far
dig
more
on
effective
white leftists,
anti-imperialist.
or is that a support of Trump?
You can make of it whatever the fuck you want. Either that's
What do you mean by it?
condemnation and incrimination of the Beiswol, or it's somehow praising Trump. I don't really care how you interpret it. I'm not scared to be associated with Trump. My views on Trump are clear as day.
Okay, well, tell me about them. Is Trump an anti-imperialist then?
Not ideologically, but in practice, he was far more of an anti-imperialist than all the Beiswol scum combined.
Well, see, I just don't understand this because saying more or less, I mean, you're basically saying the white leftists have zero impact, right? I mean, that's kind of the point here. So, like,
Yes,
you're like,
absolutely. Yes, thank God you
so
made it so
Trump is,
simple. Yes, zero
Trump is
impact.
moving in a positive direction toward anti-imperialism, in your view, then,
Zero
yeah?
impact on imperialism. Zero. Actually, I take that back.
I'm talking
Leftists
about Trump.
exercise the role of being the cultural vanguard of American imperialism.
Well, it seems like the cultural vanguard of American imperialism would actually be the U.S. mainstream media.
Okay, let me ask you a question. What do LGBT rights in Zimbabwe under Mugabe mean? The movement, the
That's your
LGBT
question.
movement in Zimbabwe under Mugabe, what did it mean?
Are you using Zimbabwe as a proxy for a socialist state by any chance?
I think so. Why not? It's a
Really
socialist party. It was ruled by a socialist party. Maybe the state isn't socialist, but Mugabe is a socialist.
interesting. Zimbabwe is one of the few places in Africa that's done any land reform whatsoever. But you wonder, is that land reform socialist in background? Because there are non-socialist land reforms, like in Afghanistan, for example.
You
This was
can call
also
it
done by a
whatever you
socialist.
want. It's precisely the land reform that is the basis of any socialist. What socialists would do in power is land reform.
Oh, I agree with you completely. You've got to do land reform because the basis here is a maldistribution of land that comes out of the theft of land from imperialism or settlers or what have you, right? Or enclosures in the case of Europe. So theft of the land is a primary kind of moment, and yeah, it has to be undone, right? But how should it be undone, right? Then what happens, right? What do we actually
So
do?
Mugabe, he should have been more conciliatory toward the landowning class of Zimbabwe at the expense of the black majority. That's what you're saying.
No, not at all.
He should have
Be more
he should
concerned
have
with
made it
the
like a
land.
bunch of hippie communes, Zimbabwe instead.
No, I'm not a big fan of that. I'm a supporter of like the collectivization of land, in the Stalinist and Maoist kind of model, because you have to raise the productivity of land, right? You have an underinvestment in agriculture in a lot of these places, right? And a lot of that has to do with small plots. There's not a lot of agricultural capital and so
Before
on,
any
right?
of
So
those collectivizations happened, whether that's going to take the form of Stalinist collectivization or Mao's Great Leap Forward, establishment of the people's communes, you had a general land reform that was not a form of collectivization.
Yeah, that's true, right? You broke the landlord class and appropriated their land. Yeah. So maybe that's phase one, right? The question is, what happens next, right?
So why bring this up? What's the point?
Well, I think we're getting a little bit afield. I think the original question was, how does, going kind of out of your way to say, you're not a big fan of gays,
When did I
trans
say that?
folks.
When did I say that?
Well, you say you forcefully reject wokeism. I mean, these are the groups
Yes.
which are out there advocating for these kinds of positions. If you reject it, I mean,
What's
it's a
the
little confusing
positions?
for me because I'm like, what is your actual position? That's why I'm asking questions here. But if you reject that,
So is this an interview or a debate?
where are you standing? You know?
Is this an interview or a debate? What positions do they put forward?
Well, I can't have a debate until I know the position. You know,
Okay.
maybe I
My
agree
my
with it, then I'm
position
not
is
going to
that
do
I
it.
have nothing against gays or LGBT. I reject LGBT as a separate interest group. I reject that.
Okay.
And
Now,
many people who are uh, falling under that category reject it as well. Not all gay people, for example, not all lesbians, for example, want to be, not even all transgenders, for example, want to be associated with these psychotic people who say, my pronouns are she, schwa, ji, ju, ba, and neo pronouns make no sense, that they're not one of the two genders. There's 25 different genders. Sorry. Most LGBT people probably don't agree with that.
well, I mean, the word that's traditionally used for this in Marxism is tailism, right? I mean, you're taking the most reactionary elements of the working class and saying
Sorry.
that's what we're going to go with. That's
Okay.
the common
Excellent.
denominator.
What's reactionary about what I'm saying?
Like you're moving things towards a position that is very similar to, very close to those who say these people should not have rights at all, right? I mean, that's where the country's going, right? I mean,
Okay,
if
I
you
disagree.
don't take a
Who's saying
side,
that? Who's saying that?
then you're basically supporting the way things are going, more or less,
Okay,
right?
who's
I mean,
saying
like
that?
we're at a moment where the Supreme Court is banning abortion, right, and
No,
throwing
it's
out a
not.
whole mass of law
Supreme
which
Court's not
supports
banning
all
anything.
kinds of progressive things, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, maybe you're not a fan of gay marriage, for example, right?
The
Should
Supreme
that be
Supreme
thrown out by
Supreme
the
Court
court as
isn't
well?
banning anything. Supreme Court's
Well,
not
I
banning
mean,
anything. You're wrong about
you're sort
basic
of using
politics.
Republican language in that. Yeah, Republicans would say, we're not banning it, we're just turning it over to the states, right? But everyone knows what's going to happen in the states, right? So I'm just
Okay,
wondering,
whose
like,
fault is
if you
that? You
don't
haven't
care
made your
about
position
this
popular enough.
and
Whose
say that it
fault?
doesn't matter, then
Whose fault
that's
is it
kind of
that you
like
can't make your
supporting, isn't
position
it?
popular? Because you want to write off the flyover states and all those people as irredeemable. So you have to use the brute force of federal legislation to enforce it on them. You can't win those people over. They're a lost cause. Only the coastal elites who are enlightened are redeemable in the eyes of bourgeois
Sounds
such
like
as
a
yourself.
Democrat position to me. I'm not taking a Democrat position. I'm not talking about flyover states here. I'm talking about discursively, right? That's
Okay,
part what we say
can
is
can you
part of
tell
our
me what
strategy.
tendency in American politics wants to say LGBT should have no rights?
Look, what we say is part of our strategy, and our strategy needs to be going towards a certain goal, right? And the goal, I think we're both on the same page here, right? The goal is workers seize power. Am I right?
Okay,
Okay. Well, so then the question is the stuff that we're saying and doing in line with that goal, or is it clashing with that goal,
I
right?
think it's in
I
line.
think if you're going against these things, then it's very hard to it doesn't you don't look like you're on the left at all, right? It looks like
I don't want
you're
to.
making
The
cause
left is a
with
failure. It's unpopular. It's a failure. It failed to accomplish anything. Why would I want to look like a bunch of losers? I don't want to look like the Chaz people in that mugshot.
Oh, I think I picked that up from your from your tweet. You don't want to look subhuman, as you put it, right? Subhuman physique.
No,
Um,
subhuman still implies a type of human. I think these people are post-human. Post-human type of thing.
okay.
And they may
It
lay
sounds
eggs.
like
I
you're
don't know if they lay eggs.
doubling down here. The
Do they
question
lay
is,
eggs?
if you're going to be if you're going to be rejecting pretty big segments of the American working class,
What? Big?
How's that build?
Big? Big? Give me that as a percentage estimate. Estimate the percentage big. Because I think those type of people are no more than 1%, and actually probably 0% because they don't fall under the category of working class anyway. They're lumpen degenerate scum. But how are these a big portion of the population in any capacity whatsoever? They are a loud minority on social media and on Twitter. Everywhere else, they have no voice, no representation, and no relevance whatsoever. And because I don't pander to these social parasite scum, you accuse me of being a reactionary and a tailist. I want you to justify your reasoning behind that. Go ahead, sir.
I think that when you go out of your way to attack gay people, right, then you alienate not only gays but a large segment of people who are friends with gays, right? Who
When
have
have I attacked
relatives who are
gays? I
gay,
didn't do that.
who
Stalin did.
support
I
gay
didn't.
rights.
Don't blame
That's
me
a
for what
big
Stalin did. I
that's a
didn't
big
attack gays at
problem
all. Stalin
with
did
the
that.
American working class.
When did
And
I attack
if you
gays?
alienate them, you're going against your own. You're shooting yourself in the foot, basically, right?
Sure.
And you
When
could say, oh well, they're unimportant, and they're a kind of convenient whipping boy that I can use because they look unusual, you know. But
are
again,
you
who
saying I'm
says stuff
attacking
like that,
gays
right?
because I'm
Who
attacking?
says,
Why are you
excuse me, I'm not done
insulting?
talking.
Why are you
Excuse me,
insulting
who
gays?
says just because somebody's a despised minority, then we can safely oppress them
Okay.
to score political
The
points?
people in the
Who
Chaz
says that?
mugshot, the people in the
I'm
Chaz
sorry, who says
mugshot,
that?
the people in
Who
the
says
Chaz
that?
mugshot, are you
Who the
calling?
fuck says that, Hayes?
Who's
Nazis say that shit. That's who says it.
you're getting a little angry, Dr.
And if you think that's
Trotsky.
going to
Hey,
make you
Dr.
popular,
Trotsky, simmer
it's going
down,
to make
simmer
you
down.
popular among Nazis.
Dr. Trotsky, I don't have soda, simmer down. Anyway, you're saying that the people in the Chaz mugshot that's what the gays are. That represents gay people.
I'm saying that when you attack activists who have put themselves
Oh,
on
so
the
that's the
line
protected
for a
class. The
certain
protected
cause,
minority is the
what do you look
ideological
like?
activists of the
What
left,
side are
which
you on?
isn't, hey, on, isn't
Who
that
are you
a little bit
allying yourself
self-serving?
with?
Isn't that a little bit self-serving where you're going to go ahead and try and say that, oh, the people who are oppressed just so happen to be the people who are discursively the ideological activist vanguards trying to push this agenda. You have turned the lumpen intelligentsia into the subject of class warfare instead of the proletariat. It's so fucking
Intelligentsia is not a
self-serving.
term
You're
yet.
basically saying
That's
people
not
who
a term.
think like I do and have the same ideas I have in my head are the true revolutionary class. Whereas the working class, because they don't have the same ideas, the enlightened ideas I have in my head, those are a bunch of scum and fuck them. But, oh, don't attack the protected class, the lumpen intelligentsia at Chaz who lynched 2 black teenagers. That's a sacred cow. You should
These
not go near
enlightened
those
ideas
people.
that you're
But
talking about are things like
you can
interracial marriage.
accuse and defame the
You know who
American
wants to
working
abolish
class
that?
as a basket of
Republicans.
deplorables, and you can call them a reactionary scum and whatever, but I can't attack this acute minority of social parasites. Interesting.
I don't actually use terms like scum. I don't attack people's
How politically
humanity.
correct of you.
I don't see that as commensurate with communist ideology in the slightest.
That's very
Not even the
politically correct of
bourgeoisie.
you.
Not even the bourgeoisie. I think the bourgeoisie should be ended, right?
I
They should
think
be
you're a
ended
hippie.
as a class.
I think you're a hippie.
They're not less than human or
Okay,
whatever.
can I
No one
give you
is.
a quotation from Chairman Mao Zedong?
Okay, you think this is going to help your case, huh?
He
Go
said,
ahead.
communism is not love. Communism is the hammer we use to destroy the class enemy. Smash the class enemy. That's what he said.
I love that quote. Yeah, that's a great quote. But what do you
But
think
it,
it means?
but it doesn't
What do you think it
align
means?
well with your hippie California bullshit now, does it?
Oh no, it aligns perfectly with it. What do you think it means?
I think it means communism is the weapon the proletariat uses to crush and break into smithereens the class enemy. None of this language. Oh, I won't call them scum. I will call them scum. The people who rule us are parasite scum. The left is made up of parasite lumpen scum, and they are enemies of the working class.
I think it's just very dangerous and poor for a communist to say this group of leftists is scum in the same way that the
Why?
bourgeoisie is.
No,
I
they're
think the
worse. They're
bourgeoisie
worse. The bourgeoisie
gets
is
set aside
motivated
some
by
special
egotism.
program. You know what I'm
They're
saying?
worse than the bourgeoisie.
They're the ones who are actually the
Much
bloodsuckers of the
worse.
poor. You don't think that the people with purple hair or whatever are the ones who are, sucking up the surplus value, do you? Is that what you think is happening here?
They are the ideological,
They're the ones who are
political.
committing imperialism
They
on
are
a
the
global
super.
scale.
Hold on. I cannot. You seem to be confused about materialism. As Marxists, we cannot ascribe moral agency to material relations of production. All we can do is condemn and attack their superstructural representatives. As far as the elimination of the bourgeoisie as a material class, and I'm not talking about the current superstructural manifestation of the monopoly bourgeoisie that's tied to the state, but the material element of the bourgeoisie that is always and everywhere reproducing itself in the countryside, as Lenin called them, that is a process that takes decades and decades and decades. It cannot directly be done in an activistic, voluntaristic way. But meanwhile, their superstructural representatives, their prostitutes, we can attack those people. We can attack the prostitutes of the bourgeoisie. We can attack the monopoly, parasite, manifestation of the bourgeoisie in the form of the deep state and the Wall Street and City of London financial ruling class and ruling class in general. We can attack those people, but as far as the fundamental social relation of the extraction of surplus value, as you're talking about it, that cannot be activistically destroyed in a voluntaristic way. That takes decades and decades of the development of the forces of production, which is a change in the mode of production, not a change in political relations of the superstructure.
Yeah, I don't see how you think that's helping your case, man. You're going onto somebody else's ground and you're fighting there in a place that you're weak, right? I mean, the same is true of like the use of the American flag. You think that communists waving the American flag, do you think you're going to be better at waving the American flag than, like before any sports game, right? Like in anywhere in the United States?
Right.
Better than the military? You think you're going to be better at waving the flag than the reactionaries?
That's the flag of my country. I was born in this country. That's the flag of my country. I was born in that country. It's my country. I'm an American.
You have no comparative advantage there, right? Do you think you're going to be better at anti-wokeism than the reactionaries who that's all they do, right? And you know how they come off, right?
Yeah, but they don't rep my communist history. Hold on. Those reactionaries aren't the ones who took over. They haven't taken over.
Do you think they represent the working class? Do you think
they're not accountable to me? They are not accountable to me because they are not distorting the meaning of Marxism and communism. They're just ignorant about it. They're not the ones going around.
They are.
They're not the ones going around and making an embarrassment.
They are absolutely the biggest distorters of Marxism and communism that exist.
No, they're not.
Way bigger than anyone with purple hair or whatever.
The distorter is not the distorter. The distorter is not the PragerU video that says communists are a bunch of lazy bum degenerates. The distorter is the person who confirms what the PragerU video is saying by identifying as a communist while being a lazy bum degenerate. That's the distorter.
What makes a person a lazy bum degenerate?
Somebody who makes excuses for their own laziness and mediocrity by trying to use the ideas of communism and class struggle to explain why, despite actually being relatively privileged in life, which most communists are, they ended up being such a fucking loser who couldn't be successful because they wanted to go to fucking arts and crafts school instead of be a doctor or something.
Isn't going to school or art school or something being successful? Like, what is being successful?
No, it's not. No, it's a waste of money, and it's fucking stupid.
Okay, what's being successful?
Being successful is you spending your money wisely. If you have privilege, if you have capital to spend and you fuck that up, you're going to blame the bourgeoisie because you're a fucking dumb bum who decided to go to fucking humanities and spend all this fucking money in some dumbass fucking creative school instead of doing something that's actually going to get some actually return on your investing capital?
I don't know. I think, most people are like pro arts, like most people enjoy consuming the arts, right? Like they like musicians, they like artists, they like painters. And, going to school for that, I don't know that people see that as such a big negative as you're making it out. I don't think people see it as a failure.
Yeah, I mean, let's say you want to be an activist, and who decides who gets to have a profession where they make a living off of that? The only people who can make a living off of arts are people who produce popular art in some capacity, which is like 0.1% of them. So those are the people who can make a living off of it, and you're not entitled to that. You're not entitled to be given money for See, for example, a doctor doesn't have to be a good doctor. You just have to know how to be a doctor. That's enough, right? An artist who's doing actual creative work, you actually have to be good at that shit to get a return on your fucking investment.
I mean, good in the sense that you are like recognized by the market, right? Does that mean you're good?
If it's not going to be the market, it's going to be the internet algorithms and clicks. And if it's not going to be that, do you think in the Soviet Union they didn't have to have artists prove their worth by actually being like popular among the masses. Yeah, you had to prove your worth.
No, I think that's better, actually. I think that's far better. You do have to prove yourself to somebody, right? But
Like for
who? The
example,
market?
yeah. For
Listen, the
example,
market
like
is
you
dominated
have
by
not
wealthy capitalists. Hey, the
like
market's dominated by wealthy capitalists, right? Is that who we're proving ourselves to? I mean, wouldn't it be far better to prove yourself to a committee made up of workers and ordinary
no.
people and
No,
artists
it would probably
themselves,
be
right?
better to prove that your art is actually popular among the masses and is reflects the taste of the people in the masses.
There has to be some kind of connection with the masses, right? But the market is a very poor judge of that, right? I mean, you know
It's
how
it's
the
it's
art
it's a
market is
better one.
dominated
It's
by
a
a
better
few rich
one than
people.
whatever fucking bureaucracy you imagine should do it instead. Like some kind of like DSA committee. Oh, we're gonna accept this art. What a horrifying thing.
Yeah, but if somebody buys like one of your pieces for $1 million, then the market has spoken, right? But one rich person could do that. Does that make you a good artist?
You're talking about so-called high art. I'm talking about popular art, which is actually mostly being fucking done through the internet, not done through money laundering schemes. Is the art world.
Well, yeah, right. The art world is full of problems. All I'm saying is that the market is not a very good proxy for your connection to the
What's the
masses, right?
market? Like for example, this is the market, right? Infrared is much more successful at spreading these ideas than you are, as reflected by the market of YouTube. You have 4K subscribers, I have 16K, so that market has spoken. What's wrong with? But I'm sure you would prefer it that like someone appoints you as the person people have to watch instead, right?
No, I think it's great. Look, you know what? If you're a communist and we share a lot of positions in common, even though I think you have a lot of fascist, I would say, look, good luck to you. Let
What
me see you
about hold
be
on?
really
But I want
successful.
you to defend your
Let me
point.
see you be so
How is it
successful that
fascist?
I cannot be in a communist space without allying with you. Let's see if that works out, right?
How am
Let's
I a
that happen.
fascist?
Let's see
How
if
am I
your
a
flag
fascist?
waving is so popular that people can't get enough of it. Yes, yes,
Okay, how am I
USA,
fascist?
USA,
How am I
communist
fascist?
USA. Okay, maybe that can happen. I mean, weird things happen, like maybe that's gonna, but you know what? This is where praxis comes in, right? This is where praxis beats theory. You can read Lenin all you want, you can quote me
How am
whoever
I
you
a
want,
fascist?
but unless you can show me, then it doesn't really add up to very much, right? And if all you do
Okay.
is attack other communists, I don't see that as something that's going to
Yeah,
win. But you know
I've been
what?
here. I've
Prove
been on
me.
the
I'd love
internet.
to be wrong.
I've been on the internet for 1 year, and I've already sown I've already shook things up among the so-called online left. But I want to ask you a question. How am I a fascist? Go ahead, explain.
Well, you seem to be very interested in articulating an ideology which pisses on marginalized groups.
Such
You don't
as,
support them.
such as
What do you mean, such as? What have you been listening during this entire
the petty
debate?
bourgeois intelligentsia, the oppressed, marginalized petty bourgeois
Well, you
intelligentsia.
call them scum and
They're scum,
parasites.
like Marx
I
called
mean,
them.
you use
Scum.
you use fancy language for it that's non-Marxist, I would say.
Marx called them scum.
But you're doing the same thing. You're putting down
Okay.
marginal
Can I
a
should I
marginalized
quote
set of groups.
what Marx and Engels said about
That's
the
fascism.
okay, fascism. I will quote you what Engels has said about the lumpen proletariat. This scum of the decaying elements of all classes, which establishes headquarters in all the big cities, is the worst of all possible allies. If the French workers, in the course of the revolution, inscribed on their houses, "Death to the thieves," and even shot down many, damn, they did it not out of enthusiasm for property because they rightfully consider it necessary to hold that band at arm's length. Sounds like they're holding those Chaz zombies that laying eggs at arm's length. Thank God for them.
Lenin
Antifa!
is coming out of a context where the petty
Antifa!
bourgeois kind of like have a huge influence in the media, right? I mean, that's sort of true today as well, right? Like, who speaks for the rich, right? It's not the bourgeoisie themselves who
Can you
are
address
pundits and
Marx?
on TV and whatever, right?
Address
It
what
is the
Engels just
petty
said.
bourgeoisie.
Engels,
Are you
fascist or
with me on
not?
this?
Frederick Engels, fascist or not?
Are you with me when I say it is the petty bourgeoisie that is the kind of dominant force in like among pundits and so forth, right? They're not the bourgeoisie, right? They're bourgeoisie
Engels said
adjacent. They
the
hope to be.
scum of the decaying elements of all classes. The urban petty bourgeoisie just so happens to be an extremely decaying class element, as the class of people who found out that they're not going to make a living being interpretive dance instructors. So, yeah, that is going to be the lumpen that Engels was talking about. Now, can you please address Engels' quotation and tell me whether or not Engels is a Nazi? Go ahead, sir.
I love how you do these long context-free quotes, and then you're like, Engels agrees with me.
Establish the context.
Engels doesn't agree with you. Engels is pragmatic, right? Engels says this, okay? We'll ally ourselves with reactionaries around an issue, and once that issue's over, then we're over, right?
Citation.
That's what Engels says.
Citation.
This is from Principles of Communism, right? And also from the Manifesto.
Citation.
We'll ally ourselves with reactionaries.
Citation.
But we will not. We're not going to lie in bed with them forever. We'll as to the extent that they represent workers.
Establish that as the context for his quote about
the minute that diverges, and
he
our
called them
paths
scum,
diverge.
sir. Dr. Trotsky, he called them scum. Can you please establish how that's the context for him calling them scum?
Because that's what you said was Nazi. Doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean this is somebody who we can now dehumanize.
No, it means
right?
it means non-binary DSA communism, right? What does it actually mean? Establish the context.
I don't know. And you sound like somebody who knows words but doesn't know their meaning or something.
Sure. May I offer my interpretation of why you're? Can I offer my interpretation of why you're stumbling and mumbling your way into saying shit you can't back up with anything?
Well, that's not actually what's happened here. What's happened is that you cannot answer any question.
But I can explain why you're doing it. I can explain why you're doing it.
What's the strategic value of cutting off large portions of the working class? How does that help you organize?
They're not large portions at all.
Oh yeah, they are. They are large portions.
They're large. You see, you think that because they're big on Twitter, but they're not big anywhere else.
Cut off anyone who isn't with you in the anti-woke backlash, right? Maybe some people think, hey, you know what? White supremacy does deeply
you seem to be confused. Why do I have to pander and appease?
Maybe some people have some sympathy with that.
I don't have to pander and appease.
Maybe large groups of people have sympathy with that.
Okay.
And then,
did Lenin unify the intelligentsia, or did
really such a thing as racism?
PhD, sir.
Okay.
There isn't really such a thing.
Oh yeah, racism.
Is that what you think?
Sure, racism isn't real. Nothing's real. It's all hippie California. Anyway, can you please answer the question?
I don't know if you're doing the equivalent of shit posting right now, or if you mean that for real, because you're not big on giving your actual positions, are you?
Here's my position.
I've had to question you.
Here's my position. So petty bourgeois ideologists and activists aren't worth a grain of shit, especially when for decades they've failed to actually reach the working class. You want me to pamper them and be nice to them when they're out here repping communism, talking communism? They haven't reached anybody. They've been complete fucking failures and clowns, prostitutes of the Democratic Party at best. It's the only impact they've ever had on reality is being prostitutes of the Democratic Party and being at the cultural vanguard of U.S. imperialism. But you want me to hold their hand and baby this class of degenerate parasites when the measure is the ability to reach the working class, not to reach each other and be nice to each other and make each other feel good. Why should I participate in a left of friends? It's a friend circle of the whole left. We're all discursively comrades with each other, and we like each other, and we're holding our hands with each other. But fuck the working class. We don't have to reach the working class. We failed at doing that for decades. Let's keep lying to ourselves and babying ourselves and going down this path of, well, at least we have each other. Everyone else is a reactionary. I don't buy that. I stand with the people. I stand with the American working class. I don't care about people who call themselves communists.
It seems like you're calling them subhuman. It doesn't seem like you really stand with them. It sounds like you're like, well, fuck you, left. I'm going to ally myself with Republicans and reactionaries.
Not subhuman.
Maybe you'll organize them.
Not subhuman.
That'll be interesting to see.
I don't have to organize the post-human.
Historically, what organizes reactionaries well is fascism. It's saying, look, I'm going to make sure you guys are taken care of. You guys, the white straight males, I'm going to make sure that you guys have health care, right?
What does that have to do with the working class?
Fuck them.
So whoever reaches the working class is a fascist.
What the hell? Is that what you think?
What are you saying? How is that anything like what I'm saying? White straight males.
Well, I'm saying when you reject wokeism, right? Whatever the hell that means.
Do you think
when you reject the idea that
do you think most black people are woke?
Patriarchy. When you reject the idea that white supremacy is a key part of our history. When you reject trans rights, when you reject gay rights,
I reject every right in the I reject human rights. I reject human rights.
You're going to organize them?
I reject
human rights. You're going to tell them, hey, I'm a communist.
I'm against human rights.
I wave a flag like you. Let's be
I
communists together.
I'm against human rights.
I'm not friends
Anyway,
with all those people with their
okay,
weird looks and whatever. They have subhuman physiques. They're not my friends.
they're post
Maybe
not
you'll be
not
embraced by
subhuman,
the country
post-human,
club set. I will be
post-human,
very interested to see whether that's true, but I
post-human,
have my doubts.
post-human.
I think you're going to be rejected pretty soundly by them. But if they do take you in,
Okay,
I think they'll
let's
take you
measure
in
it.
because
Okay, let's
you
do a
seem like a
race.
fascist. Yeah.
Sorry, let's do a race. 1 year from now, who has reached out to more working class people, me or you? You want to do the race?
Sure. Let's take it on. It's a challenge.
Okay, how do we measure it?
What's
With
on the
a
line?
YouTube channel? How do you measure it?
What do you mean a YouTube
Because you
channel?
you went by the
We both
way,
have YouTube channels.
you went on that one conservative guy, his channel. He had 400,000 views, and you made a complete ass of
Yeah.
yourself trying to sell the average person on why Stalin was good. Not once did you talk about his living memory among the Russian people today. Instead, you talked about, oh, let's go into the history and the context. Nobody bought into it. You look at the comments; they all
Oh, I'm
said you
so
were a
sorry
fool.
you didn't like my video there. Maybe you could do better. You should
Wasn't your
reach out to
video?
that guy.
You had
Maybe
a
he'd
chance to
interview you.
go. You had a chance to go reach normal people and explain them why Stalin is good. You completely fail. You are a failure
How
of
many views did that get?
communist cause. You are a failure. I give
How
you an
many
F.
views did that
I
get?
take your PhD and I'm grading you. You get an F. I have your PhD now. You're my student. I give you an F minus for defending
Gosh,
the legacy
in
of
order to
Stalin.
grade me, you would have to be my teacher, but
I
that's
am
not
your
exactly
teacher.
the situation.
I'm your teacher now. I've taken your PhD because you lost this debate so bad.
Wow.
I take your PhD. It's mine now.
Man, I got it to you. You're very entertaining. Use those
No, I'm
skills, you know.
serious.
Maybe reactionaries will have similar laughs as I'm having, you know. Maybe you'll
Can
laugh
you
your way to
define a
communist
reactionary?
revolution.
Define a reactionary.
Well, I define a reactionary as somebody whose politics are pro-capitalist and whose social views are, you know, towards the traditional family and towards a kind of toxic Christianity. In the West, that's a reactionary, right?
Okay,
Somebody
so
who looks to
paganism is
enslave
progressive then.
women in a
So
traditional
can I ask you a
family,
question?
who
Can I
is
ask you a
against
question?
gays, who is against trans, who does not believe trans people should exist or do exist even, right? Somebody who
Marx
is
and
white
Engels didn't
supremacist.
say a
This is
damn
all
thing about.
reactionary
Hold on.
ideology.
I didn't ask you just for a description. I'm asking you your reasoning. Why? Why is the trans issue decisive
And
for
I've given you
defining a
that, man.
reactionary?
I've given you copious amounts of
First time.
reasoning.
What
And
is
by
the
the way, that
reasoning for
applies to
why
you
a
pretty
trans
well.
issue is decisive?
I didn't say it was decisive, but it's part of the mix
Why?
because these are
Why?
people who believe in a traditional gender binary.
Marx and Engels did.
trans.
Well, Engels, in his Origins of the Family, said under communism, true monogamy of relations between man and woman will be realized. True monogamy, he said. He said monogamy. So your
Yeah, because it's
polysoul,
based
there's
on
no room for your
love,
hippie polysoul in
not on a
communism,
property
according to Frederick
relationship.
Engels.
Based on
No
love,
room.
though, not a property relationship.
Sure,
And you
but
know,
he said
we do
true
have that.
monogamy between man and woman. Marx said the
Okay.
most authentic human relationship is the relation between man and woman. Sounds pretty traditional to me.
Okay, well, I'm glad you have your slavish interpretation of that text. I wonder if it's
Tell
broadly
me.
shared,
You're
or if
saying
you're the only one who has
you're
it.
defining reactionary about so-called traditional family roles, right? How do you define so-called traditional family roles? Reactionaries of the 19th century, are they pro-capitalism? No. Actually, in the Communist Manifesto, they pointed out that reactionary socialists were some of the largest and biggest contingents of socialists that existed at the time. They weren't pro-capitalist. They wanted to turn the wheels back to feudalism. And you also called me a reactionary socialist. I would like to see you justify that. That's why I'm asking you. What is so reactionary
Yeah,
about
no, I
anything I
did.
say?
I did. In fact, I've been doing that for an hour, and now our debate is coming to a close. In fact, I've explained
if
to you
you're gonna run
in
away
great
now,
detail why you're reactionary and why your
Mr. Former
reactionary
Professor. I don't call you
ideology
doctor anymore. I
is
call you
a bad
Mister.
move.
You're not
I think
doctor
your
anymore,
reactionary
Mister
ideology
Ass.
is
You're not Doctor
tactically
Ass.
stupid.
Change your name. You're not Doctor Ass. You're Mister Ass now. Now
It
let me
will
ask you.
not be successful, man.
Okay,
It will
Mr.
not be
Ass.
successful.
Mr.
You're not going to
Ass.
organize
Okay,
people around
Mr.
a
Ass. Let me
reactionary
ask you a question.
ideology,
Okay, let me
except
ask
for
you a question.
fascist people.
Before you run away, I just want to ask
Hey,
you.
thanks for coming on, man. It's
You're
been
running
a
away.
real
Okay,
trip.
okay, Mr. Ass. Bye, Mr.
No,
Ass.
I'm
I
not
took
running
your
away.
PhD.
I'm just gonna I'll give you a couple of summary remarks. All right. So during this debate, I spent the entire time
You don't know what
asking
reactionary
questions
means.
in
You
order
can't
to
define
figure
it.
out
You said
what your actual platform
pro-capitalism
is.
plus
You resist
traditional
that.
family.
You
What's
don't
the
actually
traditional
explain
family? How do you
yourself
define
very
that?
well. You give me a bunch of random quotes, and then interrupt me every time I'm talking for more than 10 seconds. But
Yeah,
nonetheless, I still define all
I'm
my
not like your
terms.
students who has to
I still
listen to you
answer all the
ramble on
questions.
talking a bunch of bullshit,
And you know what?
talking
If you
nonsense.
want to show me
Everyone's
that
on
you're
my
an
stream.
effective
Nobody's watching your
communist,
dumbass stream.
fucking prove it.
Nobody
Show me
cares
that you're
about your
popular.
dumbass stream. Let me
Show
check
me
your
that you're
stream.
organizing the
I'm looking
segment
up
that you want to
Dr.
organize.
Bair.
The petty
Asatar
bourgeois,
Bair.
Republicans. Show me that you want to organize
Only
them.
200
And
people
show
are
me that you're
watching your
actually doing
shit.
that.
Only
Good
200
luck with
people
it.
are watching your shit.
And the rest of y'all, I hope this has been
Literally,
educational. I
it's
think we all
literally
learned
only
something
200
about
people
what is
watching his
reactionary
bullshit.
ideology and how it's
Yeah,
different from
only 200
communism.
people are watching you. I don't know who
I'll be
you're
back
addressing.
next
There's
week.
800 are
Take
watching
care,
me,
you guys.
200 are watching you.
All right.
He kicks me out. Okay, Dr. Ass did a horrible job. I took his PhD. PhD taken. PhD taken.
Hi.
What the fuck? Okay, PhD taken.
That was my debate, the end of it.
PhD taken. Bitch, I just took your PhD. I just took your PhD, bitch. Talk shit about me on Twitter, then you fucking give me such a poor performance. I ask you what a reactionary is. Can't even fucking answer it. Damn. I thought that was going to be a lot harder than it was.